Elaine, I think what we're seeing here in Lima is a pretty clear example of just the complexity of trying to get 195 nations to agree one thing. And that's despite some very, very high-level efforts to speed things up here. Tonight, our first report comes from my colleague, Dan Collyns.
In the 11th hour of the climate change talks, US Secretary of State John Kerry injected a sense of urgency into flagging negotiations.
And this is not just another policy issue. Measured against the array of global threats that we face today, and there are many: terrorism, extremism, epidemics, poverty, nuclear proliferation, all challenges that know no borders. Climate change absolutely ranks up there, equal with all of them.
He went on.
Every nation, and I repeat this as we hear the debates going back and forth here, every nation has a responsibility to do its part if we're going to pass this test. And only those nations who step up and respond to this threat can legitimately lay claim to any mantle of leadership and global responsibility. And yes, if you're a big, developed nation and you're not helping to lead, then you are part of the problem.
Kerry was a key figure in forging a carbon-cutting deal between the US and China last month, which set the tone for this summit. But as the multi-billion-dollar costs of climate change emerge, key funding commitments are falling short. The Chinese delegation reminded richer nations of their obligations.
The developed countries are committed to raise $100 billion by 2020. What we are asking is that they need to honor the commitment so that mutual trust can be built between countries and the international community can have confidence that the new agreement will be met.
Observers say developed nations are more focused on cutting their emissions than helping poorer nations cope with climate change. Certain financial details may be ironed out next year, but many believe rich countries still need to do more, with climate funds at just a tenth of the 2020 target.
If you think about the amount of money that governments were able to mobilize during the financial crisis, we were all saving a bunch of banks. It's pretty clear that we must also be able to mobilize funds for climate change, which is a much bigger, much broader, much more threatening disaster in slow motion.
The talks are well past the stage of attempting to avoid climate change. Instead, they're focused on preventing things from turning bad to worse. An agreement will be vital, even if the details still need to be nailed down. Delegates representing nearly 200 countries are working to draft an outline agreement which includes commitments from each country on how it will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and financial pledges from developed countries. It could then be signed at a meeting next year in Paris. Commitments don't have to be set in stone just yet, but it's clear time is running out. Dan Collyns, CCTV, Lima.